They tried to silence her. Instead, she built the loudest empire in music history. 2009. A teenager humiliated on live television. Her fairy tale moment shattered by a microphone snatched from trembling hands. 2023. A billionaire commanding stadiums like a modern-day Caesar. Her voice echoing across continents as 200,000 souls sing her words back to her with religious devotion. What happened in between is not luck, it's strategy. Cold, calculated, devastating strategy wrapped in glitter and guitar strings. The lights dimmed at MetLife Stadium as 82,000 voices rose in unison, their collective roar echoing across the New Jersey skyline like the hymns of a new religion. On stage, bathed in golden spotlights that seemed to emanate from her very presence, stood Taylor Swift. No longer the curly-haired teenager who once clutched a guitar with trembling hands, but a woman who had transformed pain into power, betrayal into billion-dollar artistry, humiliation into global domination. The Eras Tour had become more than a concert series. It was a cultural phenomenon, a 3-hour revival meeting where each song served as scripture for the Church of Swift. But as confetti cannons exploded and 82,000 phones captured the moment for digital eternity, one question burned through the manufactured euphoria: is Taylor Swift the most authentic artist alive, or the most perfect product the industry ever engineered? Had she conquered the music industry through pure talent and determination, or had she simply mastered the art of making her own cage look like a crown? The woman who sang about her truth had spent decades learning that truth itself could be weaponized, manipulated, and sold to the highest bidder. Every tear had been cataloged, every heartbreak transformed into streaming revenue, every moment of vulnerability carefully calculated for maximum emotional impact. She had become something unprecedented in the annals of celebrity, a master manipulator who made her manipulation feel like intimacy, a businesswoman who disguised her empire building as confessional songwriting. Yet beneath the glittering facade of sequined bodysuits and choreographed perfection, darker questions lingered like shadows in the spotlight. What had she sacrificed on the altar of complete narrative control? Who was Taylor Swift when the cameras stopped rolling and the crowd went home? And perhaps most disturbingly, in her quest to never be hurt again, had she forgotten how to be human? As the final notes of Karma echoed through the stadium and thousands of friendship bracelets glittered under the lights like modern prayer beads, the scope of what she had built became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just entertainment. It was mythology in real time, a carefully constructed legend that had transformed a small-town dreamer into something approaching a deity. But to understand how it all became this spectacular, we must first understand how it all began and what it cost her to become untouchable. Christmas tree lights twinkled in the windows of a colonial-style home in Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, where 11-year-old Taylor Allison Swift sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, scribbling lyrics in a purple spiral notebook with the intensity of someone receiving divine revelation. The year was 2001, and while her classmates dreamed of boy bands and movie stars, Taylor was already crafting songs about feelings too complex for her young heart to fully comprehend. Emotions that seemed to burn through her skin, demanding expression through melody and verse. Her mother, Andrea, watched from the doorway with a mixture of pride and trepidation as her daughter poured her soul onto pages. Unaware that she was witnessing the birth of what would become America's most prolific songwriter and its most calculating storyteller. The Swift family appeared picture-perfect from the outside. Successful father Scott working in finance, devoted mother Andrea managing the household with country club precision, and younger brother Austin completing the ideal suburban tableau. Yet beneath this veneer of upper-middle-class normalcy, young Taylor was already displaying the hypersensitivity to emotion and obsessive attention to detail that would later define both her artistry and her neuroses. She didn't just feel things, she felt them with an intensity that seemed almost pathological, collecting slights and kindnesses with equal fervor, filing them away in the vast emotional database that would later fuel countless songs. At school, she was the girl who remembered every whispered insult, every excluded invitation, every moment when someone's kindness felt conditional or strategic. Where other children might forget playground cruelties by dinner time, Taylor transformed them into musical compositions, her bedroom becoming a laboratory where pain was refined into art. At family gatherings, while cousins played games and adults exchanged pleasantries about golf handicaps and stock portfolios, Taylor would retreat to corners with her guitar, fingers dancing across strings as she transformed everyday moments into miniature symphonies of longing and observation. Her grandmother, Marjorie Finley, had been an opera singer who understood the particular madness that came with needing to perform, to be seen, to have your emotions validated by strangers' applause. Perhaps something in those artistic genes whispered to Taylor that performance was not just a hobby but a calling. A dangerous calling in an industry known for devouring young dreamers whole and spitting out their bones as cautionary tales. Even then, there were signs of the calculating mind that would later reshape the entertainment industry. Taylor didn't just write songs, she studied the mechanics of emotion, learning which chord progressions made people cry, which lyrical phrases lodged themselves in memory like emotional shrapnel. She approached songwriting with the methodical precision of a scientist, documenting not just her own feelings but the feelings she could induce in others. Could their early childhood experiences have laid the foundation for later triumphs or tragedies? The signs were all there, written in purple ink across notebook pages, the perfectionism that would later drive her to re-record entire albums note for note, the emotional intensity that would fuel countless heartbreak anthems, and perhaps most tellingly, the early understanding that stories, her stories, held power that adults didn't yet recognize but that she could already feel pulsing through her fingertips like electricity. By age 12, Taylor had convinced her parents to drive her to Nashville during summer breaks, where she would hand out demo CDs outside record label offices like a musical missionary spreading her gospel of teenage heartbreak and small-town dreams. The image was both heartbreaking and prophetic. A blonde teenager with a guitar case bigger than her torso, knocking on doors that would all slam shut, her demo CDs discarded in trash bins by executives who couldn't see past her youth to glimpse the empire she was already building in her mind. Music Row executives, accustomed to stage parents hawking their talentless offspring like discount merchandise, initially dismissed Taylor with the casual cruelty reserved for children who dared to dream above their station. They saw another pretty girl with a guitar, unaware they were looking at the future destroyer of their industry's traditional power structures. But Taylor possessed something that couldn't be manufactured in Nashville's songwriting factories or taught in the city's prestigious music schools. An uncanny ability to translate universal emotions into melodies that felt both deeply personal and impossibly relatable. Songs that made listeners feel like she was singing directly to their deepest secrets. The rejections came in waves, polite dismissals that grew harsher with each passing month as her persistence began to irritate executives who expected young artists to accept no as a complete sentence. "Country music is dead," one record label president told her bluntly, his words cutting through her 14-year-old confidence like a blade through silk. "Pretty girls with guitars are a dime a dozen. What makes you think you're different?" But with each no, Taylor's resolve seemed to crystallize rather than crumble, her rejection fueling a determination that bordered on obsession. She would spend hours in hotel rooms studying the industry with the intensity of a doctoral student, learning the business side of music with a focus that unnerved adults who expected teenagers to be distracted by typical adolescent concerns. She understood instinctively that talent alone wouldn't be enough to survive in an industry built on exploitation and designed to chew up young women and spit them out as cautionary tales. If she was going to make it, she would need to understand not just how to write songs, but how to control every aspect of their creation, distribution, and consumption. When the family made the radical decision to uproot their entire life and move to Nashville, Scott Swift transferring his financial career, Andrea Swift abandoning her social circles, Austin Swift leaving his friends, 14-year-old Taylor finally caught the attention of Scott Borchetta, a music executive starting his own label with more ambition than capital. Big Machine Records was a fledgling operation operating out of cramped offices that smelled like coffee and desperation, but it offered something major labels couldn't. The promise that Taylor would be heard, not silenced, that her voice would be amplified rather than filtered through the machinery of industry groupthink. The contract she signed would later become the source of her greatest professional betrayal. Its clauses carefully crafted to benefit everyone except the artist whose talent made it valuable. But in that moment, as she signed her name with the careful precision of someone who understood she was signing away more than just her songs, it felt like salvation. She was 16 years old and already thinking like a businesswoman, already understanding that every contract was a battle and every handshake a potential declaration of war. Her debut single, Tim McGraw, was crafted in her high school math class, its wistful melody floating through her mind as algebra equations blurred on the whiteboard and her classmates solved for X while she solved for stardom. The song wasn't just about young love. It was about memory, nostalgia, and the way music could transport us across time and space, themes that would become the cornerstone of her artistic empire. When it hit country radio in 2006, something shifted in the cultural landscape like tectonic plates rearranging themselves. Here was a 16-year-old girl singing about experiences she had actually lived, not stories handed to her by seasoned songwriters 3 times her age who had forgotten what it felt like to have your heart broken in the hallway between 3rd and 4th period. Her voice carried the authenticity that Nashville had been trying to manufacture for decades, the real thing that made focus groups and market research irrelevant. Country music hadn't heard anything this genuine since Johnny Cash walked into Sun Records with nothing but a voice and a story to tell. Was the success they achieved truly worth all the pain they endured? The question would haunt Taylor for years to come, echoing through hotel rooms and recording studios as the machinery of fame began to transform her from a person into a product. But in those early days, success felt pure and untainted, like morning light streaming through bedroom windows before the world woke up to complicate everything with expectations and obligations. Her self-titled debut album went platinum, and suddenly the girl who had been eating lunch alone in high school cafeterias was performing at the Grand Ole Opry. Her presence both anomalous and inevitable on that hallowed stage where legends had stood for generations. The industry veterans who had dismissed her just months earlier now lined up to congratulate her success, their smiles as artificial as the sweetener in their coffee, their handshakes carrying the weight of deals yet to be negotiated. Yet even as accolades poured in like rain after a drought, warning signs flickered like storm clouds on the horizon. The music industry, particularly its male gatekeepers who had controlled the narrative for generations, seemed uncomfortable with a teenage girl who wrote her own songs and had opinions about her career trajectory that didn't align with their vision of how young female artists should behave. They wanted to mold her, control her narrative, transform her into something more palatable and less threatening, a pretty face who sang pretty songs and never asked difficult questions about royalty rates or creative control. But Taylor had learned early that the pen was mightier than any sword, and she wielded hers with surgical precision, each song a carefully crafted weapon in an arsenal that was growing more sophisticated with every passing month. She was already planning her next move, already thinking 3 albums ahead, already understanding that in the music industry, survival meant staying one step ahead of everyone who wanted to use you for their own purposes. The transformation from promising newcomer to global phenomenon didn't happen overnight. It exploded across the cultural landscape like a supernova, brilliant and impossible to ignore, reshaping everything in its vicinity with gravitational force that pulled entire demographics into its orbit. By 2008, Taylor's sophomore album Fearless had catapulted her from country's darling to America's sweetheart, a title that felt both like a crown and a cage, beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. The girl who once performed at county fairs for dozens of people was now selling out arenas to crowds who sang every word back to her with evangelical fervor, her golden curls and sparkly dresses becoming as iconic as her increasingly sophisticated songwriting. But fame at 18 came with a price tag that no financial advisor could have calculated. Costs that weren't measured in dollars but in pieces of soul, fragments of normal human experience sacrificed on the altar of public consumption. Every relationship became tabloid fodder. Every heartbreak a commodity to be packaged and sold to millions of eager consumers who confused consuming her pain with understanding her artistry. The media machine that had lifted her to stratospheric heights now demanded constant feeding, and Taylor's personal life became the main course served daily to a ravenous public that mistook intimacy for access, confessional songwriting for personal friendship. Walking down any red carpet became an exercise in calculated performance, each smile carefully modulated for maximum visual impact, each outfit chosen to send messages she might not even want to communicate. The spontaneous teenager who had charmed Nashville with her guileless enthusiasm was learning to exist in multiple versions of herself simultaneously. The public Taylor, the private Taylor, and the Taylor who existed only in songs, each one carefully curated for specific audiences with specific expectations. The Grammy stage in 2009 felt like vindication for every small-town girl who had ever been told her dreams were too big, her ambitions too bold, her voice too young to matter in conversations dominated by industry veterans. When Fearless won Album of the Year, making Taylor the youngest artist ever to claim the prize, she stood before music's elite, clutching her golden gramophone like a shield against anyone who dared question her legitimacy or suggest that her success was anything other than earned through talent and determination. But the very industry that celebrated her was already plotting her downfall with the methodical precision of generals planning a siege. Because nothing sells magazines quite like a fallen princess. Nothing generates clicks like a beautiful young woman brought low by hubris or heartbreak, or the simple passage of time that renders all ingenues expendable. Behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting in ways her teenage mind couldn't fully process, stress accumulating like sediment in her bloodstream. Every meal was scrutinized by photographers with telephoto lenses, every outfit analyzed by fashion critics who treated her body like public property. Every song dissected for clues about her love life by fans and journalists who had appointed themselves amateur detectives in the ongoing investigation of her heart. The girl who had once found solace in songwriting now discovered that her most intimate thoughts became public property the moment they were set to melody. Her diary entries transformed into Billboard chart positions and Grammy nominations. Privacy became a luxury she could no longer afford, and authenticity, the very quality that had made her famous, became increasingly difficult to maintain when every authentic moment was immediately commodified and sold back to her as proof of her relatability. Behind all that glamour, was there an unbearable loneliness that nobody saw? The answer revealed itself in the spaces between her public appearances, in hotel rooms where room service sat untouched while she penned lyrics about feeling invisible despite being one of the most photographed women in the world. The fairy tale life that millions envied was beginning to feel more like a beautiful prison. its golden bars polished to a blinding shine that obscured the view from both inside and out. She began to understand that success at her level wasn't just about making music. It was about becoming a brand, a lifestyle, a series of carefully managed experiences that could be packaged and sold to audiences hungry for connection in an increasingly disconnected world. Every song wasn't just a creative expression. It was a product launch, a marketing campaign, a piece of intellectual property that would generate revenue streams for decades to come. The glittering facade began to crumble on a humid September evening in 2009, when MTV's Video Music Awards transformed from routine industry celebration into a cultural earthquake that would redefine Taylor's trajectory forever and expose the fault lines that ran through American popular culture like cracks in a foundation. She had just won her first VMA for You Belong With Me, and as she climbed the stage steps in her flowing white dress, she looked every inch the innocent 19-year-old who still believed in fairy tale endings and happy conclusions, still trusted that good intentions and hard work would be rewarded with respect and recognition. Then Kanye West took the microphone and everything changed. "I'ma let you finish, but Beyoncé had one of the best videos of all time." The words cut through the Paramount Theater like a knife through silk, transforming what should have been Taylor's moment of triumph into a public humiliation witnessed by millions. A crucifixion broadcast live to a global audience hungry for spectacle and controversy. The camera captured it all with pornographic precision. Her confusion morphing into understanding, her attempt to hand the microphone back gracefully, the way her shoulders seemed to fold inward as if trying to protect her heart from an unexpected assault that no amount of media training could have prepared her for. The image of her standing there, blonde hair catching the stage lights, white dress making her look younger than her 19 years, face cycling through emotions in real time, became instantly iconic, a cultural Rorschach test that revealed more about the viewer than the viewed. Some saw innocence interrupted, others saw privilege challenged. Some saw a young woman publicly humiliated. Others saw a reality check delivered to someone who had floated too high on manufactured adoration. But this wasn't just about interrupted acceptance speeches or bruised egos. This was about power, control, and who gets to determine a young woman's worth in an industry built on tearing down as much as building up. The incident became a watershed moment that exposed the misogyny lurking beneath hip-hop's bravado and country music's politeness. The way both industries treated young women as disposable commodities whose value could be determined by men who had never written a song or sold a record. The aftermath was swift and merciless, playing out across social media platforms that turned public opinion into a blood sport. Kanye became a pariah overnight, his reputation transformed from musical genius to cultural villain with the speed that only the internet could provide. But Taylor's pain became public entertainment. Her humiliation transformed into content for late-night comedy shows that made jokes about her reaction while ignoring the broader implications of what they had witnessed. Every talk show host made jokes. Every magazine dissected her reaction frame by frame like it was evidence in a criminal trial. Every social media platform became a battlefield where strangers fought about whether she deserved sympathy or scorn. The girl who had built her career on vulnerability now faced the harsh reality that vulnerability could be weaponized against her, that the same authenticity that had made her famous could be used to destroy her if she couldn't learn to control it. She retreated from the spotlight for weeks, spending sleepless nights in her Nashville condo wondering if she deserved the criticism. If perhaps she truly was as undeserving as Kanye had implied. If her success was built on foundations too fragile to withstand real scrutiny. The confidence that had carried her from small-town dreamer to global superstar cracked like glass, leaving her to examine each fragment and decide which pieces were worth keeping and which needed to be discarded entirely. Did this tragic event mark their downfall? Or was it simply the tipping point of deeper problems that had been accumulating like pressure in a fault line? The answer lay in how Taylor chose to respond to betrayal. And her response would reshape not just her career but the entire landscape of pop culture, transforming her from victim to victor through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance that would make military generals weep with envy. Instead of fading into obscurity or accepting the role of perpetual victim that the industry had prepared for her, she began crafting what would become her greatest weapon: complete narrative control. The girl who had been taught to be grateful for any attention began to understand that attention was just another form of currency, and like any currency, it could be earned, saved, spent, and invested with careful planning and ruthless execution. The studio sessions for Speak Now felt like therapy conducted in 4/4 time. Each song a deliberate response to the chaos that had consumed her life since that September evening when her worldview shattered on live television. Taylor made a conscious decision that would define the rest of her career and reshape the relationship between artist and audience in the digital age. If the world insisted on treating her story as public property, she would become the sole author of that story, the only voice authorized to interpret her experiences and assign meaning to her pain. Every track on the album was written entirely by her, a declaration of independence that doubled as an artistic manifesto and a middle finger raised to every industry executive who had suggested she needed male collaborators to legitimize her songwriting. The album cover showed her with curly hair and knowing eyes, no longer the wide-eyed teenager who had accepted whatever image her team had constructed, but a young woman who understood that image was just another instrument to be mastered. But the real transformation was happening behind closed doors in conversations with therapists and trusted friends who helped her understand that the VMAs incident wasn't really about her at all. It was about men who felt threatened by young women with power. Industries built on keeping certain people in their designated places, and the way society punishes female ambition while celebrating male aggression as authenticity or artistic integrity. This revelation didn't ease the pain, but it crystallized something harder and more valuable: purpose. The girl who had once dreamed of universal love and acceptance began to understand that some battles couldn't be won through kindness or people-pleasing, that sometimes survival required strategic thinking and emotional compartmentalization that felt more like warfare than artistry. She studied the careers of artists who had successfully reinvented themselves, learning from Madonna's shape-shifting genius and Joni Mitchell's uncompromising artistry, but also studying the failures of artists who had tried to maintain their authenticity in an industry designed to strip it away. Unlike her predecessors, Taylor had something they didn't: an entire generation of young women who saw their own struggles reflected in her very public growing pains. Fans who understood intuitively that what happened to Taylor could happen to any woman who dared to be successful, visible, and unashamed of her ambition. Dear John became her first tactical nuclear strike, a 7-minute musical assassination that named names and detailed emotional crimes with the precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. The song wasn't just about John Mayer. It was about every older man who had ever used his experience to manipulate younger women. Every relationship where power imbalances were disguised as romance. Every time someone had confused her youth with weakness. Her relationship with Jake Gyllenhaal became the final catalyst for complete metamorphosis, its toxic dynamics providing the raw material for what many consider her masterpiece, All Too Well. The original 10-minute version was more than a breakup anthem. It was a declaration that she would no longer sanitize her pain for public consumption, no longer edit her experiences to make them more palatable for audiences who preferred their female artists grateful rather than angry. Every detail in the song was precisely calculated to make listeners feel her heartbreak so acutely that they could taste the salt of her tears, from the scarf left in his sister's house to the bathroom mirror where she punched the wall. From the kitchen dancing that felt like love, to the bedroom silence that felt like death. The song was a masterclass in emotional manipulation disguised as vulnerability, proof that she had learned to weaponize the very authenticity that had once made her vulnerable. Can anyone ever truly escape from the shadow of their darkest moments? Taylor's answer came in the form of complete artistic and personal reinvention, a metamorphosis so radical that it felt less like evolution and more like resurrection. She dyed her hair platinum blonde, traded country guitars for pop synthesizers, and crafted 1989, an album that announced her refusal to be confined by genre, expectation, or the comfort zones others had constructed around her talent like a fence around a wild animal. The album's title was a deliberate provocation, naming herself after the year of her birth and claiming ownership of not just her music, but her entire mythology. Every song was a fuck you disguised as a love song. Every melody a declaration that she would no longer ask permission to exist in spaces that had never been designed for women like her. Ambitious, uncompromising, and completely unwilling to pretend that her success was accidental or undeserved. Shake It Off became an anthem for everyone who had ever been criticized for being too much, too loud, too ambitious, too visible. But beneath its cheerful exterior was a darker message. She had learned to transform criticism into fuel, to use hatred as motivation, to turn every attempt to diminish her into raw material for her next reinvention. The video showed her failing at ballet, cheerleading, and rhythmic gymnastics before finding her place among dancers who moved like her. Not perfect, but powerful, not graceful, but authentic. The album's success proved that her audience would follow her anywhere, that her connection with fans transcended musical categories or industry politics or the expectations of critics who had tried to keep her contained within country music's more restrictive boundaries. But more importantly, it demonstrated that she had learned the most valuable lesson of her career. Authenticity wasn't about revealing everything, but about controlling what you revealed and how you revealed it. She became a master strategist disguised as a confessional songwriter, each calculated vulnerability serving a larger purpose in her grand design for total cultural domination. Every interview was a chess move, every social media post a signal to fans who had learned to decode her messages like intelligence analysts studying enemy communications. Every outfit a statement about her evolving relationship with femininity, power, and the male gaze that had once defined her public image. Yet even as she conquered pop music and redefined celebrity on her own terms, the costs were becoming apparent to anyone willing to look beyond the glittering surface. Friendships became strategic alliances, romance became artistic inspiration, and spontaneity became impossible when every moment might be transformed into content for the next album cycle. The woman who had once written songs in her bedroom for the pure joy of creation now crafted them with stadium tours and streaming numbers in mind. Each melody calculated for maximum emotional and commercial impact. By her late 20s, Taylor had achieved something unprecedented in modern celebrity. Complete control over her narrative, her image, and her artistic output. She moved through the world with the calculated precision of someone who had learned that every smile would be photographed, every outfit analyzed for hidden meanings, every relationship scrutinized for signs of weakness or authenticity that might be exploited by enemies who numbered in the millions and were always watching, always waiting for her to make a mistake that could be transformed into entertainment. The 1989 era established her as more than a musician. She became a lifestyle brand, a cultural movement, and a symbol of female empowerment that transcended music to influence fashion, politics, and social movements with the kind of power usually reserved for elected officials or religious leaders. Her squad of famous friends became a carefully curated advertisement for the kind of life that was possible for women who played by her rules. Visible but controlled, powerful but palatable, successful but never threatening to the men who still controlled the industry's most important levers of power. Her relationship with Calvin Harris represented an attempt to date someone as famous as herself, to find love within the celebrity bubble where mutual understanding of media manipulation might create space for genuine connection. But even this relationship became content, their public appearances and social media posts carefully orchestrated to create a narrative of perfect love that satisfied fans' desires for fairy tale romance while protecting the messy reality of two ambitious people, trying to build something real under the glare of constant surveillance. When the relationship ended, it became raw material for songs that told only her version of events, painting Calvin as the insecure partner who couldn't handle her success while positioning herself as the victim of yet another man who had tried to diminish her light. The truth, as always, was more complicated than any song could contain. But truth had become less important than narrative control, and narrative control had become the foundation of her empire. Her brief relationship with Tom Hiddleston served as a masterclass in media manipulation. Each public appearance staged with the precision of a military operation designed to generate maximum coverage while revealing minimum authentic information. The photos of them on the beach, her wearing an ITS tank top, became instant memes and cultural artifacts that demonstrated her growing understanding of how to turn even her romantic life into performance art that served her brand while satisfying public curiosity. The Kim Kardashian phone call incident of 2016 nearly destroyed everything she had built, threatening to expose the carefully constructed mythology of Taylor Swift as calculating rather than authentic, manipulative rather than vulnerable. When Kim released edited footage of Taylor seemingly approving lyrics she had publicly criticized, the internet turned against her with the same mob mentality that had once elevated her, transforming her from victim to villain overnight through the simple act of revealing that she might be more strategic about her public image than she had previously admitted. The snake emojis flooded her social media comments like a digital plague, each one a reminder that public opinion could be weaponized against her, just as effectively as she had learned to weaponize it for her own purposes. For the first time since the VMAs incident, she faced the possibility that her carefully constructed narrative might not be strong enough to withstand a coordinated attack from celebrities with even more social media influence than herself. But instead of retreating, she doubled down on the strategy that had carried her this far: complete narrative control through strategic vulnerability. The reputation era began with her posting a video of a snake on social media, reclaiming the symbol that had been used to attack her and transforming it into armor that she wore proudly. If they wanted to call her a snake, she would become the most beautiful, dangerous, and captivating snake in the history of popular culture. The album that emerged from this period was her darkest and most explicitly strategic. Each song a calculated response to specific criticisms that addressed her haters directly while providing her fans with ammunition for the ongoing cultural war being fought in her name. Look What You Made Me Do wasn't just a comeback single. It was a declaration that she had learned to thrive on conflict, that attempts to destroy her would only make her stronger and more determined to reshape the culture in her own image. Her relationship with Joe Alwyn represented an attempt to reclaim some semblance of normal human experience, conducted largely in shadows and speculation rather than red carpet declarations and carefully staged paparazzi photos. For 6 years, she managed to maintain a connection that existed almost entirely outside public consumption, proving that she could still access genuine emotion when the cameras weren't rolling and the Twitter mobs weren't watching. But even this relationship seemed to operate within carefully constructed boundaries, its privacy so absolute that fans began to wonder if secrecy itself had become another kind of performance, if her ability to keep something hidden had become just another way of demonstrating her power over information, narrative, and public perception. The songs she wrote about their relationship were deliberately vague, offering just enough detail to satisfy fans' curiosity, while protecting the actual details of their life together from public consumption. The Folklore and Evermore albums emerged from pandemic isolation like dispatches from a different version of herself, one unmoored from the celebrity machinery that had defined her adult life and free to explore what her artistry might look like without the pressure of stadium tours, award show appearances, and carefully orchestrated public appearances designed to maintain her position at the center of American popular culture. Written in collaboration with indie darlings Aaron Dessner and Jack Antonoff, and released without the usual promotional fanfare that had accompanied her previous albums, these works revealed an artist capable of inhabiting other people's stories, of creating fictional narratives that felt more honest than her confessional hits. The woman who had been criticized for mining her personal life for material proved she could craft universal truths from pure imagination, that her songwriting abilities transcended her own experiences to touch something deeper about human nature and the stories we tell ourselves to survive. Disappointment, loss, and the passage of time. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of this period was how naturally she adapted to reduced visibility, how comfortable she seemed operating without constant public validation and media attention. The artist who had once seemed to require applause like oxygen discovered she could create meaningful work in solitude, that her relationship with music could exist independently of her relationship with fame and all the compromises that fame demanded. The surprise releases demonstrated her complete mastery of the media cycle, her ability to generate massive cultural conversations without traditional promotional campaigns or carefully orchestrated public appearances. Each album dropped like a gift to fans who had learned to trust that she would always provide exactly what they needed, even when they didn't know they needed it, solidifying her position as someone who didn't just respond to cultural moments, but created them through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. Were these final decisions acts of surrender, or courageous acts of self-preservation? The answer emerged in how she chose to return to the spotlight, not as the eager-to-please teenager who had once handed out demo CDs on Music Row, but as a business mogul who understood that in the modern music industry, ownership was everything, and sentiment was just another product to be packaged and sold to audiences hungry for authentic connection in an increasingly artificial world. The battle for her master recordings became the defining conflict of her mature career, transforming what could have been a routine business dispute into a broader conversation about artistic ownership, gender dynamics in the entertainment industry, and the way young women are systematically exploited by men who understand that talent without business acumen is just another form of currency to be extracted and monetized. When Scooter Braun's company acquired Big Machine Records, and with it the rights to her first 6 albums, Taylor faced a choice that would determine not just her financial future but her artistic legacy and her ability to control her own story. The acquisition felt like the ultimate betrayal, orchestrated by men who had watched her build an empire and decided that they deserved to profit from her labor in perpetuity. Scott Borchetta, who had discovered her and built his entire label around her success, sold her life's work to someone who had spent years trying to diminish her cultural influence, a man who represented everything she had learned to fear about the music industry's capacity for cruelty disguised as business strategy. Her response was characteristically strategic and devastatingly effective. She would simply re-record everything, creating new versions that she owned completely while rendering the original recordings commercially worthless through the simple act of providing fans with alternatives that carried her blessing and financial support. Taylor's version became more than a rebranding exercise. It was a masterclass in reclaiming power from men who had underestimated her business acumen and her connection with her audience. The re-recording project demonstrated her evolution from artist to empire, her understanding that in the modern economy, Intellectual property was the most valuable currency, and that controlling the rights to her work was more important than any Grammy or Billboard chart position. Each re-recorded album was accompanied by vault tracks, previously unreleased songs that provided additional value for fans while proving that her creative output had always exceeded what the public had been allowed to consume. All Too Well, 10-minute version, became a cultural phenomenon that transcended music to become a short film, a piece of performance art, and a masterclass in how to transform personal pain into universal catharsis. The song's success proved that audiences were hungry for authentic emotional experiences that couldn't be reduced to 3-minute radio singles or TikTok clips. That there was still space in popular culture for art that demanded attention and rewarded careful listening. The accompanying music video, directed by Taylor herself, starred Sadie Sink and Dylan O'Brien as fictional versions of her younger self and an older, manipulative boyfriend, transforming her personal experience into a broader commentary on power dynamics in relationships between older men and younger women. The video was simultaneously autobiography and fiction, confession and performance, proving her mastery of the kind of meta-textual storytelling that defined art in the social media age. The Eras Tour emerged as the culmination of everything she had learned about spectacle, storytelling, and the delicate balance between authenticity and performance that defined celebrity in the 21st century. Night after night, she transformed arenas into time machines, taking audiences through every chapter of her evolution while demonstrating that she could inhabit each era without being defined by any single version of herself. The tour became more than entertainment. It became a pilgrimage for fans who had grown up alongside her music, a 3.5-hour journey through their own emotional development reflected in her artistic evolution. Each costume change represented a different version of herself, each era a different lesson about survival, reinvention, and the courage required to continue growing when the world preferred you to remain static and easily categorizable. The economic impact of the tour was unprecedented, generating billions of dollars in revenue not just for Taylor but for every city that hosted her shows, proving that her influence extended far beyond music into local economies, tourism, and the broader cultural conversation about the value of artistic expression in a society increasingly dominated by technology and artificial intelligence. But beneath the choreographed perfection and record-breaking ticket sales, questions remained about the cost of such total control over one's image and narrative. The woman who had spent her 20s learning to weaponize vulnerability now seemed to exist in a carefully constructed reality where every emotion served a purpose. Every revelation was strategic, and spontaneity had become another casualty of success that demanded constant vigilance against threats that could emerge from any direction at any moment. Her relationship with Travis Kelce suggested a desire to access something real and unscripted, to experience romance that existed independently of artistic inspiration or public consumption, to find someone whose own fame might create space for genuine connection without the power imbalances that had defined her previous relationships with men who were threatened by her success, rather than inspired by it. Yet even this relationship seemed to unfold within the parameters of her carefully managed public persona, its every development tracked and analyzed by fans and media outlets hungry for any crack in her polished facade, any sign that she might still be capable of the kind of unguarded emotion that had defined her early songwriting and made her famous in the first place. The Super Bowl appearances and public displays of affection became content for social media platforms that transform private moments into public performance, making it impossible to determine where authentic emotion ended and strategic image management began. The relationship provided material for new songs while satisfying fans' desires for fairy tale romance, but it also raised questions about whether anyone at her level of fame could ever experience genuine intimacy, or whether all human connection inevitably became performance when subjected to the scrutiny of millions of strangers. Today, at 34, Taylor Swift exists as something more complex than a traditional celebrity. She's become a cultural institution, a business empire, and a symbol of female empowerment wrapped in the mythology of the American dream. A living example of what becomes possible when talent meets determination, meets strategic brilliance, meets the kind of luck that can only be recognized in retrospect. Her influence extends far beyond music into politics, economics, and social movements. Her endorsements capable of swaying elections and her tour announcements capable of crashing ticket-selling websites with the force of natural disasters. The Eras Tour will likely stand as her greatest achievement. A 3-hour journey through her artistic evolution that demonstrated her unique ability to transform personal pain into collective catharsis while generating enough revenue to fund small nations and enough cultural conversation to influence how an entire generation understands the relationship between art, commerce, and authentic self-expression in the digital age. Each night, hundreds of thousands of people sang her words back to her with religious fervor, proving that her decision to maintain complete narrative control had created something approaching cultural theology, a belief system built around the idea that individual stories matter, that personal growth is possible, and that survival is not just possible but can be transformed into triumph through strategic thinking and unwavering commitment to one's own vision. Yet the very completeness of her triumph raises unsettling questions about authenticity in the social media age, about what becomes lost when every human experience is immediately transformed into content for public consumption. Has Taylor Swift become the ultimate artist or the ultimate product? Has she achieved genuine artistic freedom or simply created a more sophisticated cage, one decorated with Grammy Awards and billion-dollar tour revenues that make the bars harder to see but no less restrictive? The woman who once wrote songs because she had to has become someone who writes songs because millions of people need her to. And the difference between those two motivations may be the key to understanding her lasting legacy, and the price of the kind of success that transforms individuals into institutions, people into brands, and authentic expression into carefully managed performance art. Her business acumen has inspired a generation of artists to take control of their masters and their narratives, while her songwriting has provided the soundtrack for countless personal revolutions, breakups, makeups, and coming-of-age moments that have shaped how young people understand their own emotional experiences. But perhaps her most significant contribution has been proving that it's possible to survive the music industry's attempts to diminish and control female artists. Not by playing by their rules, but by rewriting the rules entirely and then teaching others how to play the new game she created. The girl who was once humiliated on live television has become the woman who owns the narrative, controls the conversation, and transforms every attempted takedown into raw material for her next reinvention, proving that the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of female ambition is not aggression or manipulation, but strategic thinking combined with authentic talent and the kind of determination that views every setback as valuable information rather than definitive judgment. But in achieving this level of control, has she sacrificed the very vulnerability that made her music resonate in the first place? Has she become so skilled at managing her public image that she's lost touch with the spontaneous emotion that once made her songs feel like diary entries rather than carefully crafted products designed to generate specific emotional responses in carefully targeted demographic groups? What hidden secrets might still remain untold behind their public image? In a career built on confessional songwriting and apparent transparency, the most radical thing Taylor Swift might do next is reveal what parts of herself she's chosen to keep private, what aspects of her humanity she's protected from public consumption, and whether anything truly authentic can survive in the spotlight she's learned to wield with such devastating precision and calculated brilliance. The lights may have dimmed on the final show of the Eras Tour, but the questions it raised about fame, Authenticity and the price of complete narrative control will echo long after the last stadium has been emptied, and the final costume has been carefully preserved for the archive that will someday tell the story of how a small-town dreamer became the most powerful woman in music history. In the end, Taylor Swift's greatest creation may not be any single song or album, but the carefully constructed mythology of Taylor Swift herself, a story so compelling that we may never fully untangle the woman from the brand, the artist from the empire, the human being from the cultural phenomenon she's become through sheer force of will, strategic brilliance, and the kind of determination that transforms pain into power and victimhood into victory. The girl who once knocked on doors with demo CDs has become the woman who owns the building, controls the keys, and decides who gets to enter the empire she built from rejection letters and teenage heartbreak. Whether that transformation represents the ultimate artistic triumph or the ultimate artistic tragedy may be the question that defines her legacy and determines how future generations understand the relationship between authentic expression and strategic success in an age when both are necessary for survival, but increasingly difficult to maintain simultaneously.